Brad, 17 in a row. Um, what do you think? Do you think that it can keep rolling on?
I know the interest in it, and probably for both Melbourne supporters and North Melbourne supporters, it's more of interest to them than it is to us. And the reality is teams change so quickly. In the current environment, I mean, there's been a lot spoken about the turnover of our list and how we've lost a lot of experience, we've gained some new players, and when you combine that with the changes Melbourne have made, both in coaching, playing personnel, it's so irrelevant now that it just has no impact on Saturday's result. But I understand the interest in it.
If you're in the position of Melbourne, would that give you any extra impetus, or again, even from their perspective, irrelevant?
No, I think it's irrelevant for them too. I mean, it's certainly not something that we're going to talk about. It's about looking at really closely at what Melbourne did against Brisbane last week and Geelong the week before, and I'm sure they're looking at us as well as to how they need to go about it. But I mean, the performance on Saturday at the MCG is going to have absolutely nothing to do with past history.
Why do you think you have been so dominant over that period, though, Brad?
It's for a multitude of different reasons, and they've changed over the years, and they'll change again on Saturday.
A great win, Easter, a Good Friday, but there's already some reports that the AFL might consider changing the matchup next year. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we've worked for about 30 years on building the opportunity to play on Good Friday, and the club's done a power of work, both in campaigning for the game and then in doing a lot of work to make sure that we build our partnership with the Royal Children's Hospital to make it a big event. And we'd certainly relish the opportunity to continue to build on that tradition. And it takes time to build up a big marquee game. And you know, I know that the quality of the football in the first half wasn't what either team would have liked, but I was really happy with our players' response in the second half, and I'm sure all North Melbourne fans were really pleased with the standard of footy they saw in the second half from us.
34,000 though, were you a bit disappointed with the crowd?
Well, we had 28,000 against St Kilda last year. So I mean, you know, in terms of you know, we played the Bulldogs the year before and had just about 43,000. You know, and if we you know, played another Melbourne club like Bulldogs were coming off a premiership, I'm sure if we were playing Richmond coming off a premiership, we would have had a bigger crowd as well. So, but again, that's what we're talking about, building a tradition. I mean, I know a lot of my family and friends went away on holiday on Thursday night, you know, and they're either down the beach, they're interstate, they're on holidays on Good Friday. So we need time to indoctrinate North Melbourne people into the fact that you stay in Melbourne on Good Friday, you come to the footy, and then you go away Friday night and have Easter Monday away, take your kids away on school holidays. So that sort of thing takes a bit of time for people to get used to.
In building that tradition, Brad, do you think it'd be easier if there's the same opponent each year? I mean, obviously Bulldogs first year, Saints this year.
I'm not overly concerned as long as there's one core team involved, Nick. Who we play is completely up to the AFL, but I think the AFL do what they do best, and which is they always analyse what's happened and they try and make the best decision going forward. So we certainly support them in that. We'd just like a seat at the table to help build this game into a real tradition.
Speaking of Etihad and the AFL, the roof's been open a bit in the early rounds of the season. We know you've had some thoughts on the roof in the past. But
it was 6 years ago.
It was 6 years ago, no. But what about the issue at the moment?
I think enough people are saying enough about that without me adding my 2 cents worth. Yeah, I mentioned something 6 years ago. It feels like it was about 6 minutes ago. So, yeah, look, I think that it's great to have flexibility to be able to do both. And again, the AFL are the ones who are the decision makers. So we'll play under whatever conditions they put us in.
Have you had any feedback, Brad, from the AFL about the Good Friday game, how they thought it went?
Me, not personally, no. We've reviewed our game really closely, and there are a lot of things for us to improve on. But no, if there's been discussions, it's been at upper levels of management, certainly not coaching.
Brad, there's been a lot of talk about the Sicily knee to Selwood and the fact that perhaps it's too lenient. Do you think when there's intentional contact to the head, sanctions should be more severe?
I think what the match review panel have done, have looked at the impact and the potential injury that could occur. So that's something that Michael Christian certainly takes into account, and he clearly did on this occasion, because it doesn't look like there was any significant injury, but there was the potential for the injury. So I think that's why they would come to the conclusion of a suspension. But in the past, it's the biggest weighting's been given to the actual injury that's occurred, and fortunately in this case it wasn't too bad.
Do you feel for him it's a pretty tough gig? It's gone from a panel to one man being debated every week.
Yeah. Well, I used the term MRP and then said Michael Christian. So yeah, it's no longer an MRP, is it? It does rest fairly and squarely on his broad shoulders, but it's only going to get harder for him. We're only in round 3, so there are going to be a lot of contentious decisions for the rest of the year. But at least one person should aid in consistency.
Majak Dor outstanding in the VFL on the weekend. How close is he to a senior recall?
Yeah, really close. Yeah, he probably had his best game for North Melbourne in any position, whether it be VFL or AFL level on the weekend. So he's very, very close. But we've got to continue to pick the side that we think provides the best balance, and we want to get Madge to the point where, regardless of balance, because he is a great athlete and got great speed, that whether we go tall or small, he should play. So we're pretty close to that point, to be honest, and whether it's this week or in the next few, we'll wait and see, but really promising signs so far.
You've spoken about, I think, the need for him to improve his one-on-one defending. Is that an area that's sort of on the up for him? Yeah,
he did it really well on the weekend, but I think he's about 4 games in to a key defensive post, so he's still got a lot to learn, and will continue to have a lot to learn once he comes into play AFL footy too. In fact, it was the JLT game against Melbourne where he learned a lot playing on Jesse Hogan, so a little bit Christian Petrarca as well. So he's infinitely better than he was in that game, but still some things to learn.
How did you pull up? Spent a fair bit of time off with the hip.
Yeah, we were very, very cautious, in terms of his return to play. But I think whenever a player returns and finishes out the game strongly, it's always a good pointer to the next week. And we had 8 days to recover from that game too, so that's going to help him.
Seeing the D's pull out of pokies today, how proud are you to be part of a club that pulled out of pokies first?
Yeah, well, I'd love it to be everyone. I think that the game generates a lot of interest. It generates a lot of revenue, and I think that for a part of society that wrecks lives and wrecks families, we've always been very proud of the fact that we don't get involved and generate revenue from pokies. We've seen the damage it can do to society, and I'd much prefer, on a personal level, speaking for myself, not just North Melbourne, that AFL didn't have any involvement in pokies whatsoever.
Paul Ahern, another one I think was impressive in the VFL on the weekend. Brad, is he working, getting closer and closer to his debut?
Yeah, he is. I still think that a win for Paul is getting out and playing. And his form to us is a little bit secondary. I mean, the main thing is playing, feeling confident, focusing on footy, not just injuries. And when you're coming off 2 knee reconstructions, it's understandable the players run around thinking, I hope my body holds up. Paul's now at the stage where he's thinking more about footy, and his form's starting to reflect that. So I still think he's a few weeks away from pressing for senior selection, but so far so good. And if we can get him playing any AFL footy in 2018, I think that's a great result.
Taylor Garner's had a wretched run. How do you sort of keep his spirits up?
Well, we thought it was pretty minor, and it is, but because of his injury history, we want to be ultra cautious with him and just make sure that when he's right, he comes back in and gets an uninterrupted run. I mentioned a few weeks ago that he'd had that last year, and I think this will be a minor setback, but our fans are just going to have to be patient because we don't think it'll be too long, but if there's any doubt, we'll wait. And I think the other one for us is Kyron Hayden, who we said would probably be back this week, but it's just another example of our sports science team wanting to give him another 3 or 4 weeks. He's a young player coming off a shoulder reconstruction, so we'll be cautious, but with Taylor, with his injury history, we've got to be ultra cautious.
Any truth to the rumour, Brad, that Jared Waite's changed his name to Benjamin Button?
Yeah, well, if there's any truth to that, then it'd be Wadey would be the one who's spreading it. He's into all the young blokes about missing training yesterday because he did the full training load, and he said he feels more like a 25-year-old than a 30-year-old, and or a 35-year-old. But look, he's just a remarkable athlete. We've always known that. Really important part of our side, but his performance is critical, but equally important is the work that he does with our other young key forwards, and that's going to be a critical component of his role at North Melbourne in 2018.
Does he give you a bit more flexibility now that I think he played up the wing at times last year and seemed to play up the ground a fair bit on Good Friday, that he's just as you mentioned, still so athletic?
Yeah. I think that when you've got a key forward who only plays key forward, then you probably need to rotate your team a little bit to get others exposure. But I mean, we can keep him in the team and still get that exposure to other young key forwards. So he's Wadey's just so important on so many levels. He's a great person to have around the club, great for morale, and he's a great role model for the young players and how to go about their footy.
Who's Ben Jacobs lining up this week?
Well, probably not who you'd expect. We look at a whole range of things which I clearly don't want to go into in too much detail publicly. But I mean, it seems to be pretty common to talk about it in the AFL at the moment because there are some midfielders who are having really huge impacts on games. But I'm hearing a lot of coaches say what we feel internally, which is you've got to look at the collective, you've got to look at the balance of the whole midfield, you've got to look at the scoreboard at any one point in time, and you've got to be flexible enough to make changes when things aren't going your way.
How highly do you rate the Demons now, Brad? I mean, they've obviously been building to this point for a number of seasons, but seem to be getting it all together now.
Yeah, they've got great talent, they've got great capability on their list, and they've got great depth. I mean, there are some players on their list who aren't playing senior footy at the moment who are very, very talented, capable AFL players. So that tells you that the 22 they're putting out have got some real ability. So yeah, they were stiff last year to miss out on finals, and they'll be hungry to make amends for that in 2018. But yeah, they're a formidable team. We'll have to be at our best to beat them.